Hello, in this video I'm going to be introducing a status system into my game, and I'm also going to be handling a respawn of the character when they die. So a status is going to be kind of similar to stats in a sense that it's going to be a tribute to the character, so it's something that the character owns, but they are going to be quite different. So with stats we have base stats and derived stats, so this is things like your strength, dexterity, stamina, etc., and your health and mana pool and things like that. With status, they're going to be quite different, so you can receive a status through a skill effect or something like that, or in this particular case when you die, this is because your current health goes down to 0 or lower. So when that happens, you get added a death state, and what I want to then do when my character receives this status effect, I'm going to be showing up this widget to handle the respawn. I'm also going to be playing some animations, for example, so my death animations here for the character. I'm also going to disable my movement so that I can't move around when the character's dead. And I'm also going to display a status icon as well. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at. So I'll go through a quick demo first, and then we can have a look at some of the implementation details in Unreal Engine as well. Okay, so for the demo, what I'm going to do is I'll log into both the characters on these two clients, so they're being synchronized with my custom server. And what I'm going to do is I'll throw some fireballs at one of the characters. So, yeah, let's just select this character, and I'll just throw a couple of fireballs, and you can see that the character, the HP has gone down to 0 or below. The death icon has appeared here in the statuses. I got myself this widget on one of the screens, so the character that died, to handle the respawn. You can see now I'm not able to move around at all, so the movement has been blocked on this character, and I'm able to respawn by clicking this button, so this is synchronized with the server. So this is a quick demo of the status effect. So I've just introduced the one status currently, which is the death one, but I'm going to be adding a lot more in the near future, so for skills and things like that as well. So that was the quick demo, and let's look into the code. Okay, so one of the first things that I added was this status component. So this component is going to be synchronizing the status effects with the backend server, so my Java server. So the Java server is actually going to be processing and applying these status effects to the actors, and then this one is going to be essentially receiving those updates and applying the changes onto the client. So the other thing to note is that I've added the status component to my actor-based blueprint. So essentially my player blueprints as well as my monster blueprints are going to be extending this actor base, and they're going to be receiving this component. So this is where I say, for example, it's relatively similar to the stats component, where the stats are on a tribute to the actor. Both the monsters and the players are going to have these stats, and it's the same thing for status. So both of them will be able to receive a status update. So for example, the death state and things like that, this is a common thing for all actors essentially. Alright, so let's see what we have in this status component then. Okay, so let's have a look into the event begin play. So one of the first things that I do is just make sure that the actor ID is populated. So this is provided through a constructor, and in order for this to function properly, we do need an actor ID. So the next thing that I do is to fetch myself the player canvas widget. So this is, for example, to get myself the respawn widget, and again this one is only applicable if this particular actor is the player actor. So I've got a bit of a check in my connected component base to evaluate whether this actor is my player actor, and if it is, I want to fetch myself the player canvas, and then I want to also assign the status component to the respawn widget, because the status component is going to be the one which processes the respawn request. So that's what we do here, and then I also make a request to fetch the status, right? So in order to fetch that, I send a request to my Java server, and I just basically need to provide an update type of fetch status. So you can ignore this thing. This is a small bug in this structured JSON component, but basically I form myself a JSON request to fetch the status, and then I can go ahead and process the response. So when I receive a response, the update type or the message type is going to be a status update, and this is the function that will process that response. Okay, so when I receive this response from the server, I receive a response containing the actor status. So this actor status is a structure which will contain the actor ID, an array of actor statuses, this boolean to define add, and also the aggregated status effects. So we can actually cross-reference this model against the Java side. So this is the actor status model. And as you can see, this is what we're going to be sending back. So this is the actor status, and it will contain an actor ID, actor statuses, which is actually a set, not a list, this boolean of add, and the status effects. So I effectively just replicated this as a structure in Unreal Engine, and this is essentially what we receive containing the actor statuses. Okay, now I can validate that the actor ID matches the one on the message, so I want to make sure that I process it on the actor component that the message is actually intended for, and then I can activate this process actor status function. So as you saw earlier, I've got this boolean called add. So this is a little feature that I added in my backend service. So I wanted to essentially, rather than sending the full state of statuses, I wanted to send a delta. So essentially, I will receive a message which will say add these statuses or remove these statuses. And this add or remove is controlled by this add boolean. So if it's true, that means the actor received these new statuses. Okay, and if we follow this add flow, this is where things will get a little bit interesting, because what we're doing is we're creating a new object which will represent the status effect, and we're going to ask to activate that status effect against the character. So let's have a look at what this looks like. So we'll first have a look at this status base blueprint. Okay, so I created a new directory for all of my status related things, and one of them is going to be this status object. So this is where I defined the status base, and there's a couple of interesting things here. So this is a pure object class, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this status base to represent the instances of my statuses. So for example, one of them is going to be for the dead state, and we'll have a look at that shortly. But all of my status effects are going to have a couple of things in common. So the first thing is that I'm going to be able to activate and deactivate them. So we'll take a look at this shortly. And then they're also going to have a couple of variables. So the first one is this status variable. And again, this one is going to be essentially the mirror of this object from Java. So it's going to have an ID, the derived effects of the status effects, when it was added, when does it expire, can this status stack, the origin, and the category. So that's going to be modeled in this variable. The status actor, so this will point to self essentially. The icon for the status, so for example, when I'm displaying this as a little widget on the action bar, I want to use a specific icon. This icon color will be applied to this icon, so quite commonly they will be incorporated into the icon itself. It's not in this particular instance. And I'm also going to have the player canvas. Because this is a raw object, I'm not able to get myself the widgets using this object class. So I'm going to be essentially passing it through a constructor. So we should be able to see that this is instance editable and exposed on spawn. So that's the basic variable. So let's have a look at the activate and deactivate flows as well. So bear in mind that these are the base implementations for the status effects, which means that we're going to create additional classes for the actual status instances, and we're going to override these functions but also call the parent. So we need to make sure that this functionality is still called. And what we do here, for instance, is we just check whether the status actor belongs to the player. So am I controlling this actor? And if so, what we want to do is grab the action bar widget, which we take from the player canvas. and then we're going to add the status to it. So if I look here, this is the status or the action bar widget, and this is the status box, so the little buff and debuff widget. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the icon and the icon color to construct this status widget, and we're going to start tracking it into this variable, so this tracked statuses variable, and we're also going to add it to the status box that we just saw earlier, so this one over here. So this is how we inject that little icon representing the status inside the action bar widget. So this functionality is controlled through the status base because this will be common across the many statuses that we have. So this functionality is simply refactored there. Okay, and on deactivate, we're essentially going to undo what we just did. So we're going to grab our status actor, we're going to check if it's a player, and if it is, we're going to remove the status using the action bar widget and providing self as a reference. And here you can see that we do the lookup of the tracked statuses. So earlier you saw that we added the status, so let's just find ourselves add status. So we added this widget to the tracked statuses using the ID, and here we're going to be removing it from a reference after removing the widget from parent if it's found, which it should be. So that's what we do on remove status. Okay, so that's all of the functionality that we have on the status base. So now let's have a look at one of the implementations, which is the dead state. So inside here, you can see that the parent class is this status base, and I've already created an override for both of these activate and deactivate function. The other thing that is worth noting is that if we go into the class defaults, this is where you can see I've provided an override for a couple of things. So the main ones are the icons really. So I've specified what the icon is supposed to look like and the icon color. In terms of the status, if you're, for example, just using native UE, you can populate all of this information here, but I'm actually receiving this information from the server, which is why you'll find it empty. And the player canvas, this is provided through the constructor. So this is provided when the object is created. So let's first look at what changes we have in this activate function. Okay, so when I call activate, one of the first things that I'm going to do is set the status actor is dead variable to true. So what I did was on my actor base component, I added a new variable for is dead. So you can see that here. And this is what I'm going to be toggling here. So the reason for that is because in my animation blueprints, I'm going to add a new state for is dead. And I'll show how that's been referenced, but that's what's going to be playing the dead animation. So I didn't want to include the dead animations in this object. I'm going to have my actor blueprint and its animation blueprint control the dead animations. And the next things that I'm going to do is get the character movement component from the status actor. So this was just another function where I just returned the character movement component because I wasn't able to access it directly. And what I'm going to do here is simply set the movement mode to none, and this will effectively disable all movement on that actor to prevent it moving around, right? Because I don't want my dead actor moving around. The next thing that I'm going to do is if the actor is a player, I'm going to grab my player canvas. So this is what's been populated through the constructor, and that will contain the respawn widget, and I'm just going to make that visible as well. So again, to just highlight, why do I need to pass the player canvas widget onto this component? This is because I'm not able to get widgets of class. So you can see if I type this, it's not available. If I go into my status component, I'm able to call this function. So this is mainly because these are raw objects and they don't have the context necessary to fetch these widgets. And in terms of the player canvas, this is the player canvas widget that I have. So this will contain all of the nested widgets inside, and this is the respawn widgets that I'm referencing here. So this is the respawn one, and this is what I'm going to be toggling with visibility. Okay, now let's have a look at what happens on deactivate. So as before, we're going to make sure to call the parent function. So this will execute everything necessary in status base. We're then going to grab the status actor and update the isDead parameter to false. So the actor is no longer dead. We're then going to grab the character movement component and enable the movement. So we do this by setting the movement mode back to walking. And then we're going to check if this is a player. If it is, we want to then hide the respawn widget. So this will complete the deactivate function for us. Okay, and now let's have a look at how we actually play the dead animation. So if you remember, I've got this isDead parameter on my actor-based blueprint. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be extending this to my actual player character. So for example, if I go v2, human, and then let's say I'm going to be looking at the male character. This character, this is the base appearance for them, so I'm going to be able to override them. But the animation class is defined here. So if I go ahead and find it, this is the animation blueprint. And inside the event graph, we'll be able to see that on event blueprint update animation, I'm going to be essentially gathering the state of my character. And one of the things that I'm going to be extracting here is whether or not my player character is dead. So you can see this is where I set this variable here inside the animation blueprint. So now that I have this parameter populated, I can go back to the anim graph, and this is what I'm using, the state machine over here. And if I go inside here, I've added this new state for dead. So in order to get into this state, so in order to transition into it, this isDead parameter has to be true, and to get out of it, it has to be not true, right? So this is how I get in and out of this dead state, and inside it, all I'm going to do is play this animation. So this way it's a little bit more flexible for me, because if I go now into my human female, for example, the animation blueprint will be quite similar, but for example, inside this dead state, I'm going to be playing a different animation sequence, right? And you're going to have different ones for your different monsters and things like that. And I didn't want to have this sort of structure or this information present inside my status instance itself. So that's why I instead let the actor and the animation blueprint handle these animations. Okay, so now we can go back to the status component to see what we have here. So we now know what it is that we want to create, this status object, but how do we find it? So we're going to find it through a this function, getDataTableRow, and we're going to be finding it using the category. So what we're going to need to do is create a data table which will contain our classes representing those objects, and we're going to be using the category to identify them. So let's have a look at this data table. Okay, so this is the status data table that I created, and in order to create a data table, it's under miscellaneous and data table. So the thing that you'll need to provide here is the row structure. So this is a structure that you'll need to create. And I've just created this structure over here, this status lookup. And inside there, it's just got this status class. And you can see here, this is my status base. So the base object that we created over there. And it's a, let's just find it. So rather than an object reference, it's going to be a class reference. So this is how we're able to construct the object using this structure. So if I go back here, this is what I created. So as I mentioned, I've only created the one status right now. I'm using the category to identify it. Potentially I'll change this to an ID, but at the moment this will work just fine. And you can see I've referenced myself this dead state to be the class to load, right? So when I reference dead as my category, I want to be loading up this dead state class. Okay, so now let's go back to the status component. So you can see that I've got this get data table row. So you can find it by just table row. So there it is. And what you'll need to provide is the data table that you want to select. So in my case is this status DT. I'm providing the category as the row name, and it's going to provide me the out row. So as you can see here, there's my status class, and then I can simply do construct status base. So you can do construct object, from class, and once you feed that class in, you can see it's pre-populating the constructor values that I'll need. So in my case, as I mentioned before, we want to provide the player canvas because we can't do the lookup in the object itself. And I'm also providing the actor as the status actor, which is going to be used for referencing them. And I've got the status object as well, which is coming from my server. So this client doesn't really know everything about that status. This is provided through my server in my case. Then I add it to actor statuses variable, so I can do a quick lookup when I want to remove it. And then I call this activate method, which is the generic method from status base, and it's being overridden by my dead status in this case. So this is how we go ahead and activate a status from my component. Okay, so the last thing to look at then is how do we deactivate the status. So as I mentioned from the server, I'm going to have this add boolean. So if it's false, that means I want to remove these statuses. And what I'm going to do is I'll just iterate over each one of those. And we've already referenced them in this variable actor statuses. So that means I can do a quick lookup. So I can find it using the ID. As you can see here, I add it using the ID field from my actor status, and once it's found, I can go ahead and call the deactivate method, and I can also remove it from this variable. So again, the deactivate method is the generic one from status base, and it's been overridden by the dead status object. So that's how I can call essentially all of the logic from the dead status and deactivate it. Okay, so that basically covers the entirety of how I add and remove statuses on my actors. And I guess I just want to highlight some of the advantages of having our own instances to represent these states. It's mainly because we want to refactor all of the logic inside this status base component. We also don't want to clutter up our actual status component with all of the different combinations of logics that we may want to apply. So for instance, if I want to add a new, let's say, burning state effect, I'll create a new object which will have a parent of status base. On activate, I might add some visual effects onto the actor, and that logic can again just live inside the new status component. So it's kind of tucked away and kept clean in its own object without cluttering the status component. So keeping things refactored and clean will be quite beneficial here. So that's what it will achieve. Okay, so perhaps we'll finish off with a quick demo again, and I'll try and describe things as they come. So I'll just log into both of these characters, and what I'll do is I'll throw some fireballs at this character. Right, so when the character's HP goes to 0, so the server is going to go ahead and add the dead state to this particular actor. So what we'll do is we'll enter this function. We'll go through is true. The new status will have a category of dead. We're going to get this data table and find the data table row containing the dead category. So that's what will come out here, this dead state. We construct this object, filling in some of these parameters, and we're going to effectively call this activate function. So what we'll do is we'll enter this function over here. We then first call the parent, so we go inside the status base, and what we're going to do is we're going to check if this is a player, which is why you'll only see this add the status widget inside the action bar on the player. So if I just open both of these up, you'll see that there's a little icon over there, and it's not present here. This is because we check that this is a player. We then go back to the dead state and we continue executing this stuff. So we grab the status actor, we toggle the is dead variable, so we set that to true, which will then be caught in the animation blueprint and play the dead animation. We then grab the character movement component, we effectively disable it by setting the movement mode to none. We also then check if this is a player again, and we will display the respawn widget again only on the player's client. So this is where you can see this respawn widget is only present in one of the clients. Now if I click respawn, the server is going to send an update to force update my motion. So I didn't actually cover that, but all I'm doing is setting the actor position to something that the server defines. And we then go through the deactivate flow, so where the add is going to be false. So we essentially look for the actor status inside this variable. We find it by ID, and then we call the deactivate flow. So this again is going to be calling this function over here, which will call the parent. So it will first call this thing over here, which will remove the icon from the buff bar. So you can see now this is empty. We then continue over here where we will set the isDead parameter to false. So again, it will reset the animation, and we can enable the movement. And finally, if the respawn widget was enabled, we will hide it if this is a player. So that's it for the demo. So thanks and see you next time. Bye.